The first time I heard my mother whisper, "Is he truly my son?" the words didn't belong to a story or a dream. They floated across a small kitchen, thin as steam from a kettle, fragile as a moth wing, and they landed between us like a question no one knew how to carry. She said it to the window, to the reflection of our home in the glass, to the desert that watched everything and said nothing back. She put a hand to her chest the way people do when they run into a memory and it hurts. And then she smiled at me with a softness that made the question feel even heavier. That smile said, "I love you." That whisper asked, "What if love isn't enough to explain the past?" My mother's voice has always been the first thing I hear in the morning, even when she doesn't speak. It's in the way the screen door sighs, when the wind pushes it open. It's in the broom she pulls along the floor. It's in the careful way she stirs a pot, tasting with the back of the spoon, deciding if something needs salt or time or patience. She grew up out here, where the mesa looks like it sleeps with one eye open and the sky lets. You see everything you are and everything you aren't. She teaches me what belongs to us family stories, songs for the road, the slow way of listening, and what must be treated with respect. She never parades her heritage for show. She holds it the way you hold water in your hands, close, careful, grateful. For as long as I can remember, she's had 2 photographs on the fridge. One is of me, missing my front teeth, holding up a fish so small it looks like a shiny leaf. The other is a faded picture of 2 silhouettes by a river at dawn. The light makes them look like a promise. Sometimes, when she thinks I'm not looking, she presses her fingertips to that second picture and breathes, like she's trying to catch the last note of a song that left the room years ago. If I asked about the man beside her, she would say, "He was a good person. He taught me to pay attention. That's all." She never used his name. Not even once. In a town this size, stories run ahead of you. People here don't gossip the way cities do. It's more like the land itself keeps a ledger and sometimes reads it back to you in the voice of someone passing by. I heard versions of who my father might be from a mechanic who wore sadness like old grease, from a teacher who kept an extra chair by the window, from an aunt who laughed in sentences that didn't end. Some said I was the son of a traveler who never meant to stay. Some said I arrived on a night when the north wind made doors slam and dogs howl. Some said my mother once loved a man whose shadows looked like mine. All the stories had a piece of truth, and all of them missed the center. The center was this: my mother had a lost love, and the desert kept it for her like a sealed letter. She never opened it in front of me. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe opening it would mean losing whatever it saved. On the evening that started everything, the sun hung low and red over the ridge, and the air smelled like rain even though the sky had been clear all day. I came home with dust in my shoes and a question in my throat. A pickup I didn't know sat near the fence. 2 children took turns jumping from the tailgate, screaming with the kind of joy that makes the dust look alive. A woman waved. A man stood back, hands in his pockets, wearing the uneasy smile of someone who has walked a long way to arrive exactly where they swore they wouldn't. Returned up, my mother stepped out onto the porch and met the man's eyes. She didn't stumble. She didn't run. She looked at him as if he were a season that had arrived out of order, a winter that came in June or a spring that forgot to bloom. I felt something shift, like a door at the edge of a house opening on its own. The quiet stretched until the youngest child asked for water, and the spell broke like thin ice. We went into the kitchen because kitchens are where strangers become less strange. That's when my mother whispered the question, not to him, not to me, not to anyone really. Is he truly my son? I didn't know who he was. The man? One of the children? Me? I didn't ask. I watched her hand touch the old photo on the fridge, and I watched the man studying the same picture with the heavy look that people wear when they're adding up years and trying not to cry in front of anybody. The man said he was passing through but needed to see the land again. Needed to stand under the same sky that once convinced him he belonged somewhere. He said he had news and that the road will not let you keep news for long. The woman, who had a kindness that made you sit up straighter without realizing it, squeezed his arm and told us their car had been acting up. The children drank water and counted the cracks in the floor and then started counting other things. Flies, chairs, the number of times the screen door squeaked. Children always count. It's how they measure a room for safety. Here's a sentence I didn't expect to say out loud that night. I have always wanted a father, but I have never wanted to hurt my mother to have one. I don't know if that makes sense. It's like standing in a river and wanting the current to carry you and also wanting the shore to hold you steady. You can't have both at once, not really. But that's what I wanted. We sat with coffee that tasted like the late hour. The man asked polite questions first. That's the old way. You don't reach for the heart of something until you've greeted the hands. He asked about the garden. He asked if the old cottonwood still clung to the wash after all those floods. He asked if the night birds still argued in the same tree. He coughed when the words started to run out. Then he said he had come to see my mother because time is a circle that sometimes closes when you think it's too late. He pulled a small cedar box from his bag and placed it on the table. The lid had been carved by someone with steady hands, someone who knew how to make a line say more than it should. My mother stared at it the way you stare at a storm far off on the horizon. She didn't touch it. She asked what was inside. He said, "A letter I should have given you a long time ago, and something our son should have, if he is our son." He said it carefully, the way you set a glass down when you don't trust the table. The room changed. The air did that thing. Air does when lightning thinks about coming closer. My mother's face did not crack. She has a way of keeping her feelings like birds in a safe cage. You can hear the fluttering, but you do not see the feathers. She asked him to explain. He said that long ago there was a choice and he had made a poor one. He had left because he thought leaving would protect everyone. He learned later that silence grows thorns. He had tried to return, and every road he took led him somewhere other than our door. "I think I walked in circles," he said. "Some circles take years." The woman looked at him and, without words, told us she knew these roads well now. Too, I didn't stand up. I didn't run. I wanted to. I wanted to shout, and then I wanted to be the quietest person alive. I wanted to ask what the word "our" meant in his mouth. I wanted to ask my mother if she had ever said that word out loud to herself at night when the coyotes sang far away. I wanted to ask if the children bouncing on the tailgate had my smile, and if that meant anything. Instead, I asked if the garden needed water. Later, when the porch light drew a thin circle around us and the ground cooled and the coyotes started up their threadbare chorus, the man told a story about the river and the old photo. He didn't name anything sacred. He talked about taking care of a place by listening to it, about love as a responsibility, about promises made to the morning that must be kept by sundown. He didn't push. He didn't demand. He set his story down like a blanket and let us decide if we wanted to sit on it. My mother told him about the years between then and now in the plain language of people who have lived without a net: work, heat, wind, laughter, sickness, friends who stayed, friends who left. She spoke about me with a kind of pride that isn't loud. It's steady. She said I had an eye for cracks that turn into doors, that I could fix things others might throw away. She said I was stubborn in the right places, and careful in the right places, and learning when to be both at once. Then she looked at him, and he looked at me, and the night pressed closer like it wanted to hear the answer before it was ready to be said. He asked finally if I would be open to a test. He didn't say the letters out loud at first, but I heard them anyway. sitting between us like a small boat we weren't sure how to climb into. DNA, he said it would not change what he felt he owed, or what he hoped to repair, but it might bring clarity. He said the word clarity like a person thirsty for water that doesn't taste like doubt. I thought about all the ways truth arrives, carried on the back of time, wrapped in letters that waited too long in drawers, whispered in kitchens, sung by people who stand next to you when the wind is loud. I thought about the things I already knew without letters or tests, the way my mother's worry makes her wash dishes no one used, the way she touches the photograph and breathes like, the river is still right there. I thought about the weight of knowing and the weight of not knowing, and how maybe the heavier thing is the one we find a way to carry. We agreed. Not because a test can tell you everything, but because sometimes a door asks to be opened, and refusing it would feel like refusing a part of the future. The woman, the man's companion, offered to help with the process. She spoke gently, with a calm that made even the porch light look less lonely. She said she believed in families that find their way with patience and care. She said there is no shame in asking for truth. When the kid arrived, it felt like a visitor that didn't know the customs of our house. We placed it on the table and none of us touched it. The children asked why grown-ups freeze in front of things that are easy to hold. We laughed because laughter is what you do when the sky leans in. We read the directions. We nodded. We stepped out into the evening where the breeze carried sage and dust and the long sound of trains moving freight through the dark. We did what we were told to do, then we waited. Waiting is its own kind of ceremony, one that asks for gentleness with yourself. While we waited, life kept moving. The garden needed water. The pickup needed a new belt. The children found a lizard and named it after a cloud. The woman taught me how to make rope from yucca fibers in a way that did not mistake what should never be taken without gratitude. The man looked at the riverbed and traced the memory of water with his boots. My mother cooked a stew that tasted like a promise not to abandon each other, no matter what the envelope said. People came by when they saw the new truck and the unfamiliar faces. They brought pies and questions. My mother told them we were catching up with old friends. That wasn't a lie, even if it left certain rooms of the truth closed for now. Some nodded, satisfied. Some nodded, curious. A few nodded like they had already counted the cracks, the chairs, the squeaks, and had arrived at the same question that kept humming in our kitchen. At night, my mother and I sat with the window open and listened to the far hills breathe. She told me things she had never said at once, in order, without flinching. There had been a time when she believed in a life built beside a river that didn't run dry. There had been a promise, and then a drought. There had been letters that never came, and then a bus ticket that did. There had been work that saved her, and loneliness that punished her, and the unexpected light of my first cry. She said none of this to make me feel like a replacement for anything. She said it so I would know that love changes shape but not purpose. The night before the results were due to arrive, the sky went strange. It turned that impossible color it sometimes gets, like a peach bruised by the thumb of a giant. The wind moved in from the west, straight and hot, and the cottonwood did a slow dance that meant storms might be coming, or a story is about to be told. The children fell asleep under a blanket on the floor. The woman braided her hair. The man stood at the edge of the porch with his hands open, as if holding darkness without asking it for anything. My mother stepped outside and stood beside him. She didn't say his name. She said the thing that had been walking around the house for days. If he is your son, he has always been as much mine as I know how to make him. If he is not your son, he has still been a gift that arrived when the road was hardest. He nodded. He didn't look away. He said, I lost a love I did not know how to keep, and I lost a life I did not know I had. I don't want to lose the truth, too. His voice did not break, but it looked like it wanted to. Then the mail truck pulled up early. as if the driver had felt the weight of the envelope from miles away and wanted to finish the route, while the day was still making promises it could keep. We stood shoulder to shoulder at the gate. The driver handed over a thin package that could have been anything: recipes, a flyer, a map, but we knew better. He tipped his hat and said the wind smelled like rain. We said thank you in the way people do when a small kindness arrives at the exact right time. Back in the kitchen, the kettle whistled. The children stirred. The woman put cups on the table. The man held the envelope like you hold a bird that's too tired to fly. My mother watched me. I watched her. The desert watched all of us, calm and completely awake. Somewhere a coyote made a sound that could have been laughter or grief. Sometimes it's the same sound. Is he truly my son? My mother whispered. Again, but this time her eyes were on me, and the question was made of love and fear and relief she didn't want to betray. I reached for the envelope and felt the room lean in, every nail, every plate, every photograph listening for the sound of paper tearing. The first rip was so soft it barely existed. The second was a clean line. I slid the letter out. The man took a breath. The woman closed her eyes. The kettle stopped itself as if even it understood. I looked at the words that could name us or unname us, that could shine a light or cast a shadow, and then the porch steps creaked. A new voice called from outside, a voice I had never heard and somehow recognized, a voice carrying something heavier than news. The door swung open on its own, like a hand ushering in the next chapter, and the figure in the doorway said, before I could speak, "Wait, don't read it yet. There's something you all need to know." The figure in the doorway was older than the man beside my mother, but carried himself like the wind had taught him how to stand. His hair was gray at the edges and tied back, his coat dusted from the road. He didn't step in right away. He looked at each of us as if counting us into a circle, and only when the room got its breath back did he cross the threshold. The screen door whispered shut behind him. He nodded to my mother in the way people do when they've known each other longer than a single story can hold. He set a small bundle on the table, wrapped in cloth the color of wet sand. "This should be open before that," he said, tipping his chin at the envelope. His voice was steady, not loud, and the children woke all the way as if the steadiness itself was a bell. The man straightened but didn't move closer. The woman rested a hand on the back of a chair like she was holding the room in place. My mother's eyes softened, not in relief, but in recognition. "I thought you were gone," she said. The elder shook his head. "I was on the far side," he said. "Now I'm here." He didn't sit until my mother asked him to, and even then he touched the chair first, a gentle check, as if asking the wood permission. He glanced at the cedar box, at the kettle, at the old photo on the fridge. "Some things stay," he said. He looked at me then, like a person reading a sign he hasn't seen in years and finding that he still knows the words. "You were small when I left," he said. "You liked to tuck stones in your pockets and call them by river names." I felt heat rush to my face. I didn't remember that, but I wanted it to be true. It felt like the kind of small truth a life balances on without anyone noticing. "Before you open what the road brought," he said, nodding again to the envelope, "you should hear what the land kept." He lifted the bundle and unwound the cloth. Inside was a narrow notebook with soft corners and a folded paper tied with thin twine. The notebook smelled faintly of cedar and rain. He placed it in front of my mother, and she laid her hand on it, like it might move if she didn't keep it company. The man's jaw flexed. The woman's mouth pressed into a line that wasn't fear and wasn't calm. It was something in between, like a bridge. The elder told us a story that did not give away what it shouldn't. He spoke of a time when the river still made a sound you could hear from the road. He spoke of a younger woman who came to restore a garden with soil baked hard by years of sun. and of a younger man who showed up with help and stayed longer than he planned. He spoke of mornings when smoke from the cook fire rose straight up, a good sign, and of evenings when clouds stacked like mountains and promised rain. He didn't say names. He said she and he and they and the. Room filled in the rest without trying. He said a choice had been made then, not by the land, but by people afraid of losing face, or money, or control. Pressure makes odd shapes in a life. He said the man left because he was told leaving was the only way to do right. He said the woman stayed because staying is not the same as giving up. He said letters were written and sent to an address that watched them arrive and never passed them along. Sometimes a door is closed on purpose, he said. Sometimes the person behind it thinks they are saving you. He didn't look at anyone when he said that, but the man lowered his eyes. He looked at me again. On the morning you were born, he said, there was frost on the grass that disappeared as soon as the sun touched it. People came and stood at the doorway and said the right words, the ones that welcome a small person and also remind the grown-ups to take care. Someone spoke for the river. Someone spoke for the wind. Someone spoke for the road. It wasn't a ceremony to put on a shelf. It was a promise to live by. He turned a page in the notebook with 2 fingers. I wrote what I could so I wouldn't forget who promised what. My mother's breath made a quiet tremble in the air. You kept it, she said. He nodded. I kept what I could, he said. The rest had other ideas. His eyes flicked to the man. You were written into it, he said softly. Not as a possession, but as a responsibility. Not because of blood, but because of a promise made under the same sky. We didn't use your name. We used the word for the person who carries water and doesn't spill. The man's hands pressed together as if in prayer or apology. I didn't know, he said. I didn't hear it. The elder nodded again. That's what distance does. The woman touched the cloth the notebook had been wrapped in. We came because we ran out of ways to guess, she said. We don't want to take anything. We want to stop hurting by accident. She looked at my mother with a kindness that had weight to it. I didn't know him then, she said. Meaning the man, but I know him now. He is better at staying than he used to be. My mother listened without flinching. Staying is learned, she said. Like listening. They held each other's eyes for a long breath. Not as rivals, but as 2 people who have walked rough ground and still believe in making a meal from what's in the cupboard. The children crept closer, drawn not to the adult words, but to the objects those words leaned on. The older one tapped the cedar box and asked if there was a song inside. The elder smiled and said, sometimes. The younger one pointed to the envelope like it might be a bird. If we open it, will it fly away? He asked. No one answered. In the quiet, a train a few miles off laid a low note across the town. It felt like the past clearing its throat. The elder slid the folded paper toward my mother. This is from the clinic, he said. A copy I kept when I thought we might need it one day. It shows who signed as contact when you checked in. The signature is not the man's, but the name above it is. The writing is careful, but the ink smudged at the end like a hand was shaking. He didn't explain the smudge. He didn't have to. Sometimes even the truth trembles. My mother unfolded the page and studied it the way she studies a recipe written by someone she loves who measures in handfuls. She nodded once, like she had just tasted something she had been cooking for years and discovered a spice she hadn't named until now. The man reached for the cedar box but stopped short. May I? He asked. My mother lifted the lid and showed him what was inside. A loop of cotton thread, a bead the color of the river at dusk, a small scrap of cloth with a stitched pattern like rain. The man's face went soft around the eyes. I remember that bead, he said, voice thin. Not this exact one, but the way the light sat in it. He looked at me then, quick and almost shy, as if asking permission to connect dots that had waited too long to be connected. I didn't look away. I wanted him to have the courage to keep talking. We didn't touch the envelope. The elder said we should wait until morning. Let the sun see you when you read it, he said. Let the river hear you say what you're going to do with the news. He wasn't making rules. He was offering a way to keep from breaking. Something we might not know how to fix. The woman nodded. The man breathed like he had been holding his lungs closed all week. My mother's gaze floated to the window and rested on the dark shape of the cottonwood. Morning is kinder, she said. So we set the envelope on the windowsill where the first light would find it. We ate a simple meal because food steadies hands. The elder told small stories to the children about the time a jackrabbit outran a dust devil and the time a shy dog learned to trust a fence post before it trusted people. The woman showed me how to twist yucca fibers tighter so the rope doesn't pinch the skin. The man took 2 steps onto the porch and stood there like a figure carved into a doorway, not quite inside, not quite out, listening to coyotes stitch their loose song across the hills. Later, when the house had quieted, the elder sat with me at the table. The kettle had gone cold. The paper from the clinic lay between us. You want answers, he said. You also want everyone to be okay no matter what the answer says. I nodded. He tapped the notebook. This is a kind of DNA too, said. Not the kind from a lab. The kind that grows from promises and the work people do to keep them. He didn't tell me which kind mattered more. He let the question sit where it was, right as a coin on the table. I asked him why he left. He didn't pretend not to understand. I thought I was in the way, he said. Sometimes people tell you that loudly. Sometimes they tell you with silence. I believe them. That was my mistake. He looked toward my mother's room. I should have asked you both what you needed. I should have stayed long enough to hear the truth under the noise. His apology wasn't a display. It was a tool he set down where we could all see it, so we would know it was there when we needed to use it. When the moon climbed and laid a pale road across the yard, the woman brought blankets to the children and tucked them in. She paused by me and said, "Whatever happens, we will not rush you." She said, "we" in a way that included the man and also included my mother, and to my surprise, included me. It felt like standing under a shade tree. You didn't know you were allowed to sit beneath. I wanted to thank her, and I did, but the word felt small compared to what I meant. I couldn't sleep. So I stood by the window where the envelope waited and watched the horizon change its mind about darkness. The desert has a way of telling you when something is about to shift. Even the bugs go quiet like they're holding their breath. The cedar box sat on the table, patient and sure. I opened it again, not to take anything, just to look. Under the bead and thread was a tiny folded corner of a photograph I hadn't seen before. I slid it out. It was a close-up of a hand holding a newborn foot, the skin wrinkled like a dry leaf after rain. No faces, no names, only touch. On the back, in a careful hand, was a word I couldn't make out at first. I turned it to the lamp and read it. It wasn't a name. It was a promise. Keep. The porch steps creaked again. I turned. This time the figure at the door was smaller, wrapped in a shawl, with eyes that had the rough shine of river stones. She looked past me to the envelope, then to the elder, who rose without surprise. "I thought you might come," he said. She nodded. "I have something that belongs with that," she said, holding up an old envelope of her own, stained at the corner, thick with years. My mother kept it for a reason she never explained. She told me to bring it when these faces were in the same room again. The man and the woman appeared, pulled from sleep by a thread none of us could see. My mother stepped into the doorway of her room, a hand to the frame, steady and silent. The small visitor crossed the room and set her bundle beside the other, two histories leaning on each other like tired travelers. "Before the sun," she said. "Before you open anything, this one first." She touched the old paper as if it were a living thing. The elder rested his hand on the table, asking the wood to witness. The desert wind slipped under the door and made the envelope shiver. I looked at my mother. She looked at me. The river, though dry this season, had never felt closer. And somewhere just beyond the edge of light, something waited with its own story, ready to change the shape of ours. The small envelope the visitor placed on the table sat heavier than its size should allow. Its paper was weathered, its corners curled like it had been carried through storms and held in too many hands. No one reached for it right away. The elder folded his hands and looked at the wood grain as if waiting for the house itself to grant permission. My mother stood still in the doorway, her face calm but her eyes restless, like a bird that can't decide whether to take flight or stay perched. The man shifted his weight, his shoulders drawn tight, while the woman traced circles on the back of the chair she leaned against. The children stirred but stayed quiet, sensing that this moment was different from all the others, heavier than any bedtime story. The visitor's voice was steady but worn, carrying the texture of years. "This paper was hidden for too long," she said. "It holds words that were meant to move, not gather dust." My mother believed one day it would be needed, when questions grew too loud to ignore. She placed her hand on the envelope and closed her eyes for a breath, then slid it toward me. "You should open it when the time feels right. It is meant for you, though others will hear what it says." Her words did not explain the mystery, only thickened it, like smoke rolling in before a fire shows itself. The man stepped forward, then stopped short. His voice cracked slightly when he asked, "Why was it kept?" "Why didn't she give it sooner?" The visitor shook her head. "Because she thought timing mattered more than truth. She thought there would be a moment when all who needed to hear it were together. Perhaps that moment is now, perhaps not, but here we are." Her answer was simple, but it pressed into all of us like a stone underfoot you can't ignore. I touched the envelope but didn't break the seal. My hand trembled, not from fear alone, but from the weight of choice. Every unopened letter is a door, and once opened, it cannot be shut again. I set it back down, and silence pressed on us like a second roof. The elder nodded at my hesitation. "Sometimes waiting is the braver act," he said. My mother gave the faintest smile, though her eyes glistened with something unshed. "He knows when to listen," she whispered, half to herself. We tried to breathe into the silence, but it grew heavier with every tick of the old clock. The man finally spoke again, his voice carrying a mixture of longing and regret. "If this letter proves what I hope, then I have lost years I can never get back. If it proves otherwise, then I will have carried hope that was never mine to hold." His words dropped into the room like stones into deep water, rippling through each of us. The woman moved closer to him, her hand brushing his sleeve. "Hope is never wasted," she said softly. "It teaches us how to carry weight." My mother's lips pressed tight, as though she wanted to argue but swallowed the thought instead. The children, restless from the tension, began to explore the room quietly. The younger one opened the cedar box again, humming to himself as he arranged the bead, the thread, the scrap of cloth. He held them up to the light, as if trying to see what story lived inside each object. The elder watched him with a kind of reverence. "Children know how to find the truth in small things," he murmured. The older child asked me suddenly, "Do you want him to be your father?" The bluntness made everyone's chest tighten. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The question was too raw, and yet it was the heart of everything unspoken between us. My silence was its own kind of answer. As night wore on, layers of the conflict began to show themselves. It wasn't just about blood or names. It was about the promises that had been made and broken, the years that had stretched like a canyon between people, and the wounds that had been carried without words. My mother, though quiet, seemed to live in two worlds at once, one where she had raised me alone with her steady strength, and another where the return of this man threatened to redraw the map of her past. The man himself was caught between what he hoped to reclaim and what he feared to lose again. The woman beside him carried her own silent burden, knowing she had built a life with someone who might still be haunted by an unfinished chapter. Even the elder seemed torn, part guardian of old truths, part witness to a family's unraveling. The visitor who had brought the letter sat back, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. She said little more, but her presence was like a shadow from another time, reminding us that secrets do not stay buried forever. She had seen enough to know that stories have a way of demanding to be told when the circle is complete. I lay awake long after the others drifted into uneasy rest. The envelope sat near the window, catching the thin light of the moon, and the pihanma. Unopened DNA results rested nearby, both silent but alive with possibility. It felt as though two rivers ran beside each other, one made of science and the other made of memory, and soon they would meet. I wondered which current would pull us harder. I thought of the word I had found scrawled on the back of the old photograph, keepend. I wondered what, exactly, I was being asked to keep. Love, truth, hope, or all of them at once. By morning, the desert was washed in pale gold, but the tension inside the house was heavier than the cool air. The elder brewed coffee and said nothing, watching the horizon like it might give him answers. My mother moved through the kitchen, with quiet efficiency, setting bread on the table, but her hand shook when she poured water into the cups. The man stood outside, looking at the cottonwood, shoulders squared but heart clearly unsteady. The woman helped the children gather wildflowers from the edge of the yard, weaving them into small bundles. Everyone had a task, but none of it eased the waiting. The conflict wasn't only about identity anymore. It was about what truth would demand of each of us. If the man was proven to be my father, it would mean my mother had carried years of silence that shaped both our lives. It would mean forgiveness might be asked, though not easily given. If the test or the letter said otherwise, it would mean the man's return was built on false hope, and the children who had grown to see me as some kind of kin would have to untangle their place in this story. The elder, too, would face the weight of promises spoken long ago that had gone unfulfilled. And me, no matter what, I would carry a new story that reshaped who I thought I was. The envelope on the sill fluttered in the breeze from the cracked window. It was as if even the desert itself was reminding us that nothing stays still forever. I wanted to reach for it, to tear it open and end the suspense, but my hand froze. I realized then that the conflict wasn't just about answers, it was about whether we were ready for them. Sometimes the hardest truth isn't the one written on paper, but the one we must live after we've read it. And as I stood there, the weight of everyone's gaze pressing into me, I felt that readiness was the one thing none of us could claim yet. The morning stretched long, every sound sharper than usual, as though the world itself was listening. The kettle's hiss sounded like a warning. The screen door's squeak felt like a cry. Even the footsteps across the wooden floor seemed louder, heavier. The envelope on the sill, pale and trembling in the thin light, became the center of the room without moving at all. Every glance returned to it, as if the truth it carried had a gravity none of us could escape. The elder sat with his hands folded, his gaze steady on the horizon. He said nothing, but his silence had weight, like a drumbeat you could feel but not hear. The visitor with the shawl sat near the corner, watching with eyes that held too many secrets. The man stood outside, pacing slowly near the cottonwood, his figure outlined against the rising sun. The woman trailed him with her eyes, steady and loyal, though her fingers clutched the fabric of her skirt tight. My mother stayed in the kitchen, moving bowls, folding cloths, finding reasons to keep her hands busy. She would not look at the envelope, but she didn't need to. Her whole body knew it was there. I tried to steady myself, but my thoughts ran like wild horses. Every possible outcome crashed into me at once. If he was my father, what did that mean for the years my mother and I had lived without him? If he wasn't, what would happen to the fragile hope that had brought him back? And what of the woman? And the children who stood by him, ready to tie their story to ours? Every choice felt like it would cut someone open, no matter which way it fell. The children sensed the heaviness, but they were too young to understand it fully. They whispered to each other in the corner, turning wildflowers into crowns, making light in the thick air. Their laughter rang thin but true, like a small fire in the cold. The older one asked if the letter had magic in it, if opening it would change everything in one moment. No one answered, but the question landed hard. Because that was the truth. We all believed it would. By midday, the waiting had grown unbearable. The man finally stepped back inside, his face drawn tight, his eyes shadowed. "We can't stand in circles forever," he said. His voice trembled, but his words were sharp. "Every minute we wait, the past keeps winning. Every breath we take in silence gives power to old wounds." He looked directly at me, his gaze heavy and unflinching. "You deserve to know who you are. You deserve the truth, even if it breaks all of us." My mother set down the cloth she was folding and turned to face him. Her voice was low, but steady. "The truth is not just about blood. It is about what you choose to carry and who you choose to stand beside. You left once. You cannot demand. Now that the answer fix everything at once." Her words cut, but they were not cruel. They were the kind of truth forged from survival. The woman stepped between them, her hands out, her tone calm but urgent. "Please," she said, "don't fight with words that can't be taken back. We all came here because silence hurt too much. Let's not replace it with anger." She turned to me, her eyes soft. "What do you want? Not them, not me. You. What do you need to happen?" I couldn't answer. The weight of so many eyes, so many hopes, pressed me into stillness. I felt like the desert itself, dry, cracked, waiting for rain but terrified of the storm it would bring. I looked at the elder, hoping he would guide me, but he only said, "Every road waits for the one who dares to walk it. But no one can choose your step for you." The visitor rose then, the shawl slipping from her shoulders, revealing hands weathered but steady. She placed her palm on the unopened envelope, then on the old one she had brought. "Both truths live here," she said. "One measured in blood, the other in memory. One written by a test, the other by hands that shook but still held the pen. Which one you open first will shape how you hear the other." The man's voice cracked again, softer now. "I need to know if he's mine." My mother's reply was barely above a whisper, but it carried through the room. "I need to know if he is still mine, no matter what you find." Their words met in the air and clashed like stones, both sharp, both unyielding. The children pressed closer to their mother, sensing the storm building. The woman pulled them in, but her eyes stayed fixed on me. I could see it in her face. She was bracing herself, preparing to stand no matter what truth fell from the paper. The room tightened. Every breath, every glance, every heartbeat leaned toward the moment that could no longer be delayed. The elder's voice broke the silence, deep and certain. "It is time." He looked at me. "Not because we are ready. We never are. But because the truth does not wait forever." I reached for the letter, my fingers brushing the rough paper, the seal brittle with age. My chest pounded so hard it felt like the sound filled the room. My mother closed her eyes. The man leaned forward, his hands clasped. The woman held her children close. The elder's face was grave, the visitor's still. I slid my finger under the flap, the sound of tearing. Paper sharp as lightning. The envelope opened, but before I could unfold what was inside, a knock rattled the door. Hard, urgent, insistent. Every head turned. The knock came again, louder, as if whoever stood there carried news too heavy to wait a second longer. The air. Inside the house froze. The elder's eyes narrowed, my mother's face drained of color, and the man clenched his fists. The children clung to their mother's skirt, their laughter gone, their eyes wide. The knock came a third time, shaking the door in its frame. Then a voice, hoarse, strained, but clear, called from outside. "Don't open it. Not yet. You don't know everything." The envelope shook in my hand, half open, the truth trembling on its edge. The door rattled again, and the voice grew louder. "If you open that without hearing me first, you will carry a wound that will never close." No one moved. The envelope lay open on the table. The door shook with urgency. Every heartbeat in. The room held the question, which truth comes first and which one will break us? The knock at the door did not stop. Each strike seemed to echo through the house like thunder rolling across the desert. My hand hovered over the half-opened letter, my pulse drumming so loud it felt like the walls might hear it. My mother stepped forward first, her hand on the doorknob, but she paused and looked back at me. The question in her eyes was clear. Should we let the truth in, or let the paper speak first? I nodded, and she opened the door. On the porch stood a man older than the one who claimed to be my father, his hair almost white, his face lined with years but steady with purpose. He leaned on a cane, his breathing shallow, but his eyes burned bright. "You don't know the full story," he said, his voice strained but firm. "If you open that letter without hearing what I have carried all this time, you will only have half the truth." The elder inside rose slowly, his face heavy with recognition. "You came," he said softly, as though he had been waiting. The visitor with the shawl lowered her head, as if she already knew what this man had brought. My mother stood frozen, her fingers gripping the doorframe. The man beside her clenched his jaw, his whole body tense with fear of what might be revealed. Newcomer stepped inside, leaning heavily on his cane. He looked at me first, then at my mother. "I was there," he said, "the night he was born. I saw the choice that was made. And I saw the lie that followed." His eyes flicked toward the man who had returned. "You were meant to stay. You were told to go. And when you left, someone else decided to seal your fate with silence." My mother's lips parted, her face paling. "Who?" she whispered. The old man closed his eyes for a long breath. "Your family," he said at last. "They feared what people would say, feared the trouble it might bring. They believed sending him away would protect you, would keep the town from turning its back. But they didn't protect you, they broke you both." The weight of his words pressed down on everyone. My mother trembled, not with anger, but with sorrow that had been waiting for years to surface. The man lowered his head, shame flooding his face. The woman beside him took his hand, not to excuse him, but to steady him. The children watched wide-eyed, too young to understand, but old enough to feel the crack in the air. The elder nodded slowly. "The truth has many keepers," he said, "and many thieves. But it finds its way back when the time is right." The old man placed a folded note on the table beside the open envelope. "This was written by her father," he said, pointing gently toward my mother. "He never sent it. He never showed it to her. But he gave it to me before he died, and he asked me to deliver it when the circle brought us back together." My mother reached for the note with trembling hands. She opened it slowly, her eyes scanning the faded ink. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes, but her face held steady. When she finished, she folded it back carefully, as though it were a fragile wing, and placed it on the table. She looked at me then, her voice breaking. "It was never about you. It was never about whether you were his or not. It was about their fear. They let fear decide your story. The man spoke, his voice raw. I left because I thought it was my duty. I thought I was doing the right thing. But I should have fought. For you, I should have fought for both of you. His eyes filled with tears as he looked at me, and for that, I am sorry. No letter, no test can erase the years I lost. But if I am your father, I will spend what time I have left trying to earn the right to be here. And if I am not, I will still stand by you if you let me. The woman squeezed his hand, her own tears slipping silently. We came here ready to lose everything, she said. But maybe what matters is what we can build, not what was broken. The elder gestured toward the envelope still waiting on the sill. Now the paper can speak, he said. But hear it with all that has been said tonight, not as a cold fact, but as part of a story much larger than any test. I unfolded the letter at last, the seal already broken. My eyes skimmed the words that spelled out what the test revealed. My heart pounded as the truth settled into me, a truth that both answered and complicated everything at once. I didn't read it out loud. Instead, I looked first at my mother, then at the man, then at the woman and children who watched with such fragile hope, and I said only this: the paper tells one story, but my life tells another. I will not let one cancel out the other. Silence filled the room, heavy but alive. My mother stepped closer, cupping my face with both hands, her tears finally falling. You have always been mine, she whispered. No test could ever change that. The man nodded, his face streaked with tears. And if the truth allows me to call you my son, I will. But if it does not, then I will still call you family, if you'll let me. The children rushed forward then, their small hands tugging at mine. Does this mean we're still together? The younger one asked, his voice small but full of hope. I smiled through the weight in my chest. Yes, I said. We are together. That's what matters. The woman released a breath she had been holding for hours. She stepped forward, her eyes kind but firm. Family is not just about who shares your blood, she said softly. It is about who stays, who listens, who chooses you again and again. The elder nodded, his eyes shining in the dim light. The river runs many paths, he said, but all water returns to the same sea. So it is with truth. So it is with love. As the sun began to rise higher, filling the room with gold, we sat together at the table, the envelope and letters between us, but no longer the only truths we needed. We shared food, not to fill our stomachs, but to steady our hearts. We spoke not of past wounds, but of what we would do now to mend them. The old man with the cane leaned back, his face softening with relief. The circle is complete, he said. Not perfect, but whole enough to hold. My mother reached across the table and took the man's hand, not as a lover reaching for the past, but as a person reaching toward peace. He bowed his head, accepting her touch as a gift he had never earned, but would never take lightly again. And as I looked around the room, the elder with his wisdom, the visitor with her shawl, the woman with her strength, the children with their laughter, my mother with her unshakable love, and the man with his open regret, I realized that my story was not about one answer. It was about many, about loss and return, about silence and truth, about how blood might bind, but choice builds in the end. The desert held us all, quiet and steady, its wind whispering through the cottonwood as if to remind us that nothing is ever truly lost, only waiting to be found again. And I knew, whatever name the papers gave me, I had already found what mattered most. A family, bound not only by the past, but by the promise to keep walking forward together.